So welcome to part 2 of the DB video series when we're looking at transferring from a DB, a defined benefit or final salary scheme, and looking at the various things you need to think about. I'm not endorsing one route or another. You can't take this as advice. You need to seek professional advice if you're transferring a scheme that's worth more than 30,000. So this is just designed to look at the different things that you need to think about. I've tried to break down the positives and negatives of transferring so that you can weigh up your options. I've looked at a very different way that benefits can be taken from an occupational pension scheme compared to a personal pension arrangement. And before purchasing any investment or insurance product, you should do your own research and consult a properly qualified specialist. If you have any specific questions that relate to your own circumstances, just leave a comment after this video. Securing a very high transfer value can seem very attractive, but there's some very real risks associated with doing so. And because there are sometimes some very large values involved, there's some less than scrupulous advisors getting involved who aren't always focused on their client's best interests. And as I've already said, a guaranteed and inflation-proofed pension for you and your spouse is a very attractive benefit, particularly if you're planning on living a long time. And there's the rub, you just don't know how long you are going to live. So let's take a simple example so I can illustrate this point a bit more clearly. Let's say you're single and age 65 and you start drawing your final salary pension of, say, £10,000 per annum. If you survive for 30 years, the pension then would be almost £21,000 a year. That's assuming 2.5% inflation. That's great. So you've got your money's worth in that scenario. But now let's kill you off after just 1 year. And you've only had, obviously, one lot of £10,000, so not so great. One of the problems you have when comparing your options is it's not always that clear-cut. There might be some very good reasons why you should stick with the guaranteed pension. Then again, there might be some very good reasons to cut and run. Let's say you decided to take the transfer value of £200,000 instead of the £10,000 a year, and you die after only 1 year. Then there'd still obviously be £200,000 in the pot to leave to whoever you want to leave it to. But let's look at the risks. The problem with having £200,000 in the pot is how to keep hold of it long enough to fund your retirement for the rest of your life. So that's those £10,000 a year as we were talking about. Clearly, if you just take a flat £10,000 out each year, it would only last for 20 years. What happens if you live more than 20 years? That's why it's very important that if you do transfer, the fund has to be managed well to provide the growth it's going to need in order to provide that income that you're going to need to live on for the rest of your life. So this leads us to one of the biggest risks. What happens if the investment conditions are not so good and your £200,000 pot keeps falling in value? You need to be sure you're going to have sufficient funds to live on regardless of what happens to your investments. And to work out that, you need to work out what your likely income and expenditure is going to be in retirement and look at what would happen in certain scenarios. I'll look at the risks in a lot more detail later on in the series.